This is Gene DeLisio with a featured sports interview from WDLB and WOSQ. One of the outstanding Marshfield High School athletes of the 1950s was Dave Buss. Buss played basketball for the Marshfield Tigers between 1953 and 1956, scoring 624 points during his Tiger career. He also quarterbacked the Tiger football team and later served as the head basketball coach at both UW Green Bay and Long Beach State. Coach Buss was named to the Marshfield Tiger Athletic Hall of Fame in 2008.
Well, first of all, I'm really honored to be included with the people that are already in it, and it means a great deal to me. This is my hometown, and I've was born here and raised here and went through the whole school system, and being included in something permanent is very special, and I really appreciate that they elected me to join that group.
When you look back on your Tiger athletic career in the mid-1950s, what are some things that come to your mind and stand out?
Well, first of all, how a few number of coaches did so much. 4 coaches did everything. They coached all the sports and assisted each other. Like they all coached football, and then a couple of them coached basketball, and they did track, and they did golf, and they did wrestling. They did all this, and it's 4 people that did it. So they were really dedicated and spent a lot of hours and didn't have any off seasons because they were busy all the time. Looking at it from a practical sense, today the equipment is so much better today. You look back on we didn't have face masks in football. We had cloth helmets until I think I was a sophomore in high school before we got a plastic helmet. The cleats were about 3.5 inches long, and they were used shoes. The people, they provided the shoes, but they were been using them for 5-6 years, and it was cold. We didn't have all this warm Under Armour and things. So from an equipment standpoint, boy, we were really old-fashioned compared to today's. But we played the same game. We blocked and tackled, and we had to shoot the ball in the basket. And we had coaches that were really interested in teaching us how to play. And we had the fans came out and watched, and the band played. And so the essence of what's here today, kind of in a high-tech situation, was there then. And I'm talking 50 years ago. It just wasn't, we didn't have a lot of the luxuries that are here today.
Tell us about some of the coaches that you had who really influenced you.
Well, one was Lee Groutman, who was my coach when I was a sophomore and a junior. He had really a big influence on my career because I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be a teacher. And, he helped me a lot in that direction, showing me that it was possible. And we were friends. We were made friends for over 50 years, and we still get together, and we play golf, and we call each other on the phone, and I know his children, and I was at his wedding, and his kids came to my basketball camp, and it's really a long-term friendship based on the 2 years here. And another one was Dean Ehlers, who was the basketball coach my senior year, who was only here in Marshfield 1 year, but we remained friends. He went on to become the head basketball coach at Memphis State, and when I was just starting out coaching at a little town of Palmyra between Whitewater and Milwaukee, when he brought Memphis State in to play Al McGuire at Marquette, and my wife and I, Ruth and myself, went in to see him before the game, and we had a nice evening. I was trying to get a job in a bigger high school, and when we were done that night, he had shown me that having a goal as being a college coach was a realistic goal, and that was very good to have somebody else give me the feeling that I could have that as a goal. I also learned from that boy, you never set your goals low. You always set your goals as high as you can and shoot for it, because if you stick with it and you really put the time in to obtain it, it's possible. And it's really true. And the next year I went back to grad school, got my master's, got a assistant basketball job at West Virginia Tech, and then after 3 years there, I was hired at Green Bay to start their program and to grow it. So that really started my my head coaching career in college.
Coach, when you look back on your high school career with the Marshfield Tigers, first of all, how about some individuals you played with who were standouts, some guys you really enjoyed the experience of football or basketball with?
Well, I played with Tom Southworth. I was a quarterback, he was a quarterback, and we kind of alternated possessions or plays because we brought the plays in. Neil Fleming was a very, very good runner, and very quick, very fast, and very, very tough. And he was a superb player. He went down and played at Miami, and then played some at the University of Wisconsin. Dwayne Teamey was a good scorer in basketball. Bricko, I forget his first name. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't. But he played on the basketball team. Gene Dix played. He was a track star. He was very good, and we played everything. So we intermixed with all the athletes. If the guys didn't play all sports, we still got to play with them because it was a small school, wasn't as big as it is now, and the numbers were less in football and less in baseball and everything. So we played everything to fill out the teams, and because we liked to play it and it was possible. Today it's less and less possible to play multi-sports because of the demands of the training and the weightlifting and the out-of-season programs. But when I was in high school, you could play any, and you were welcome to play many sports. So we had a lot of guys that just went out and played one season and then moved on to the other and then moved on to the other, and maybe we didn't become as good of players in that one particular sport because we didn't play it 9 or 10 months out of the year, but we certainly got the experience of playing many sports and found out what they were like. And most of them don't carry over to long-term involvement, but like golf does and tennis does and things like that. So you got exposed to everything, and even though you can't play everything until you're 30 years old, it's still nice to play football. My grandson played football for a couple of years and then quit playing, but you learn how to put the equipment on. You learn what it was like to get there and get those pads on and go out there and getting ready to hit each other. It's different than playing tennis. It's just different. And same with basketball. You get ready and you go out and you got to go head up with a guy and you got to try to guard him and stop him. And you don't have to be great in all these sports, but if you can experience playing it, you certainly can understand it more. And when you watch it on television and listen to it on the radio, you kind of feel what it's like. You understand more what the athletes are going through.
Coach, this might be an unfair question because the game is so different today than it was back when you played. But if you look back on your basketball career, what type of a ball player were you? What were some of the strengths of your game, so to speak?
Well, I've looked back at that time, and one thing that comes to mind is that knowing what I know now, I could have been a lot better player. I could have played harder. I could have trained in the fundamental aspects more. But we went out and played, and we didn't break it down like it's broken down today. So, I remember, we had to guard somebody. We got to get in defensive stance and try to guard somebody. I think less was done in the area of fundamental shooting. I think if you look at the shooting percentages back when I played, they were a lot less. I think they thought that if you could shoot about 30%, that was pretty good. And that's changed so drastically. When I was at Green Bay, the shooting percentage for field goals for an average, I had some very good teams for like 10 years, and the average shooting percentage for the 10 years was 53%. That's a lot different than 30 when you're making over half of them. But when I played, it was, it didn't have the the proficiency in shooting percentages. And you didn't have many real tall players either. Once in a while, a team would have a 6'8" player, and he'd look like a giant to us. And you didn't have dunking. Nobody could dunk. They just couldn't get up there to dunk it. And there wasn't a lot of fast breaking. There wasn't a shot clock. You passed the ball around more. And the scoring was down. It was, the scoring in games, very seldom did you ever get into the 80s or the 70s. It was a different game. Now the people are physically really much stronger, and as you get strength, you get quicker, and you actually jump a little better if they're in the weight room now, and they're really conditioned, and they eat better, and the shoes are better. We were playing on these shoes, these Converse shoes that were canvas, and then they support, and it just was a killer on your feet. Now they got all this cushion stuff, but back then the shoes cost $6 a pair, and now they cost $150. So there is a little difference in the cost.
One thing I've asked Mr. Southworth and other players of your era, which I think is an important question for anybody who played back then, tell us about playing in Purdy Gym and what that was like.
Well, it was a lot like other gyms we played in. So, we didn't look at, we were playing in a little bandbox, unless we went down to like Wisconsin Rapids, who had a big field house. Then it would feel like we were in a huge place. But other than that, when we played at Purdy, you had to watch it from one corner. When you shot from one corner, that balcony hung over, and if you arched the ball, you hit the underneath of the balcony, and so you learn not to shoot from that corner. You could hit the ceiling sometimes if you're out in the court, the high ceiling, and they had, if I recall, they had 3-foot restraining line around the court. So, I don't know if many people remember those. And also first of all, the restraining line was in from the out-of-bounds line 3 feet. And if you brought the ball in bounds, the defense could not enter that 3-foot lane, but you could if you were throwing it in. And then once you threw it in, it reverted back to the black line out of bounds. And also the foul line was, they call it the key. Well, it used to look like a keyhole where the lane is only 6 foot wide. So then also you alternated who was in the lane next to the basket. So the offense got one lane on one side and the defense got the lane on the other side. So if the ball came off on your side, and your guy shot it, you'd get the ball and you could put it right back into the basket. I mean, the other team had no opportunity to block you out from getting that rebound.
Coach, you mentioned Dean Ehlers really instilled the desire in you to coach at the college level. Tell us about that first job before you got to Green Bay, going to West Virginia Tech and becoming an assistant there.
Well, West Virginia Tech is about 40 miles south of Charleston. It's in the Kanawha Valley. It's an engineering school, and it was at that time, the NAI conference. There was 15 schools in West Virginia that belonged to the same conference. And I was assistant football coach, assistant basketball coach, and tennis coach, and I taught six classes. So it was a busy time. I did the scouting for the basketball team. It was tough going on the road down there because the roads are mountainous, and they didn't have guardrails. It was kind of dangerous at night. So I was very busy, but it was a great learning. That's where I learned my crafts, because I started going to basketball clinics. I met a friend at another college down there, and we used to go to basketball clinics around the area. I mean, a wide area. We'd go into Tennessee. We'd go into Kentucky. We'd go hear Ray Mears at University of Tennessee. And one time we went down, Dean Smith was like in his third year at North Carolina, and he gave a one-man clinic in Bristol, Tennessee. And he was all alone. He talked for an hour, and then he smoked a cigarette, and then he talked for another hour, and it was he said, "Oh, look, if you're ever in the area in Chapel Hill, just call me up and come on over." And so one time, my brother lived in North Carolina, and we went down to see him on, I don't know if it was the 4th of July or some holiday, and we drove over the Chapel Hill. I called him up, and Dean said, come on over to my office. And he did what he said. I mean, he sat down on the couch. We were all alone, and he just got a pad of paper and answered any questions that I had for him. And then let me go into his film room and look at any film I wanted to watch the stuff that we were talking about on film with his team. And so there was a lot of that with different coaches, and I mean that's really how I learned my craft. I found out that when I went down there, I had a lot to learn, and you have to go through that. You can't start at the top. You can't start as a head coach. You'll never learn how to coach. You gotta go through this and learn from other people and read, and that's where it all started for me. So when I went to Green Bay from Tech, I at least had my system in my head, and I knew what I wanted to do. And even though you change it over the years, if you know your system and you know how to see it and how to make changes in it if it isn't working, that's what you got to do, I think, if you're going to have any success over a long period of time.
Tell us about the Green Bay job. What attracted you to that? How you got that position?
Well, a couple things attracted me. One is, I evaluated the job right. They were just starting the school, and there was just a little thing in the newspaper about them looking for a basketball coach. But I was from Wisconsin. I knew the area a little bit, and I just felt that could really grow into a good program, and they were talking that way. They were saying that they wanted to start a basketball program and go to Division I as soon as they could. That was their goal, and so that was really attractive to me. And then being back in Wisconsin, that was exciting. So I was really gung-ho about it. And so were they. I mean, they had scholarships. They gave scholarships right away, and it was interesting. I went up there to interview the first time, and then flew back to Charleston. And when I got off the plane, my wife met me and said, "Green Bay called again, and want you to go back tomorrow because they said you're in the final three, and the final three candidates are going to interview with Vince Lombardi, and he has a opening in his schedule, and it's got to be done, the day after tomorrow." So I flew back up there the next day again, and then the following day met with Vince Lombardi, and he's the guy that hired me because he was the chancellor's advisor in the area of athletics. So that started off on a real good foot. And the Packers then, were very helpful over the years. Even though Vince left and went to Washington, Bart Starr was very interested, and he became a good friend. And they would, lend us they'd help us as they could with recruiting. We could take our recruits out to their facility, and they would show them, the locker room and their offices. And Bart, he had a guy once in a while. He'd have him over to his house. He'd just come on over and have a Coke or something, and so that was very, very helpful to get us off to a good start and get some good players in there right off the bat, which we did. We got some good players, and most of them were from Wisconsin right from the first year.
I would imagine that's going to be a unique experience for a guy who's probably not much more than 30 years old to be sitting in a room one-on-one with Vince Lombardi, and your future basically is at stake here in this discussion. What kind of a meeting was that like?
Well, it was actually it was pretty relaxed because Vince was really happy. They just got back. Some astronauts just came back. I don't know if they came back from the moon. It was December of '68 and he was really excited about that, and he was really happy. He was jovial, and I was pretty relaxed because it was like I knew him. He was on TV so much, and he was just exactly like you see on TV. His voice, I knew his voice and mannerisms and everything. He didn't know me, of course, but so it was pretty relaxed, and we just kind of had a conversation, and it wasn't a bunch of questions and answers. It was just a conversation and a couple questions. So, I didn't feel like I was under any pressure or anything. It was very enjoyable to meet a guy who we're all admired and all looked up to, and was such a national figure. So it was a very nice experience.
What was that experience like for you in building that program basically from the ground up?
I'll tell you, it was really exciting because the school they wanted us to go and try to do some big things, and they had scholarships, and they provided the resources to do it. Now, we didn't have a lot of extra money, but the chancellor realized that athletics could be very important to a new school, and so we didn't take cars to games. We either flew or we took Greyhound type buses, and we stayed in nice hotels, and we ate good. Our facilities, we had the Brown County Arena. We played all our games in the Brown County Arena from day one. I think we played one game on campus, and we played one game in Marshfield. People forget that I brought a regular season game to Marshfield one time. We played one on the state at the high school. But we always played in the Brown County Arena, which was the third best basketball facility in the state. Behind, after if you count the old barn at Madison and where the Marquette played in Milwaukee, but the arena was pretty nice place comparatively, what was in the state. So we had great facility. We had and we had a schedule that people started. A lot of people called right away, wanted to play us because they thought they were going to get a win, so at the first couple of years, it wasn't as hard to schedule. But when we started winning right away, it became harder to schedule because everybody wanted to hedge their bets. They didn't like to play home and home. They just wanted us to come to their place to play. But it was very exciting. We had some very good players from Wisconsin. We had a couple from the Chicago area, and we jumped right out of the block 16-8, and we went 23-5, and then we won 20 games the next 3 years too. So then we had an off year, and then we won 20 games or more for 4 or 5 years in a row. And then as we got kind of on a national scene, because we had gone from NAIA to Division II, and we became a power in Division II, where we were ranked number 1 in the country, and we played in the national championship game twice, and we went to a third Final Four, and so that was the era where we said, now's the time, to try to make this transition to Division I, because it takes about 3 years to go through the scheduling. At that time, when you applied to go Division I, you had to submit a 2-year schedule, and you had to play, 85% of your games against Division I schools. So we had to go to work on that because schools didn't want to play at Green Bay. They knew that we have to get this schedule in. They knew we were trying to make this transition, so they only wanted to play on their court. They didn't want to have to go on the road. But we got that done well enough where the NCAA accepted it, and so then we made the jump. And the year before we became Division I, we didn't think our team was was super, but it kind of surprised everybody, and we got to the Final Four. So it was really a nice little jumping off that we went to the Final Four, and then the next year we transitioned into Division I, where we went from playing 4 Division I teams to 27.
Coach, I want to ask you about a couple of people who I'm sure influenced you in Green Bay. One is Ed Widener. Can you talk about him and what he meant to you over there in Green Bay?
Well, first of all, he hired me. I mean, I told you about Vince, but he's the one that came in and offered me the job, the chancellor. And the thing that the one thing that he always did, he never took his eye off the ball about getting these sports to be good quality. He wanted good basketball. He wanted good soccer. We didn't have football because Vince Lombardi recommended that we not have football. It cost too much money, and it would have been too hard to sell starting it, in the town where the Packers were. So we went into soccer, and so he always provided the funds. You got to have the funds, and there were some people that weren't too interested in us growing and becoming, the power in Division II and then going into Division I. And there were some questions some years whether the legislature would vote us into Division III. And he went down there and fought those battles. And he saw that the funds were available, and he was very supportive with the teams. He'd go on the road with us sometimes to watch us play. He never missed a home game. In our banquets, he always was there, and he was very into athletics, particularly basketball and soccer, and consequently, that's the way it worked out. But if he had not been strong enough or cared enough to go down and fight the battle down at Madison, I could see the program had being put back to Division III, and Green Bay probably would have been part of the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Conference.
Also, another gentleman who certainly was a big help to you, Charlie Aslaksen. How about what he meant to your program?
Well, he's also from Marshfield, as everybody knows. He was an assistant for 11 years, and I think he came from Portage. He was at Portage High School, and he did a lot of things. It was a two-man staff, and he's got a photographic memory. He's very valuable. I felt like I had a computer before computers. He could remember everything, and very, very intelligent. He helped recruit, and he's very instrumental with getting accurate statistics right off the bat. So, you do things with statistics and records, and we felt it was very important from day one to do that with the Green Bay program. And Charlie did a lot with that, with getting our managers trained and, overseeing some of that stuff. Charlie did a little bit of everything. We were a team for a long time, and he contributed a great deal to the success of Green Bay.
When you look back on your Green Bay career, is it satisfying what you accomplished there and the way things turned out?
Yes. Yeah, I'm very happy with what we did. I'm really, getting it to Division I was not easy. We had to do a lot of things. We had to be successful in a lot of areas, and then once it became Division I, and there was a coaching change there. There was a question for a couple of years whether it was going to stay Division I, because Wisconsin-Milwaukee had gone Division I at one time, and they were, I don't know if the regents forced them to go back to Division III or who did it, but they went back to Division III, and then later they became Division I again. So that was always hanging over for a couple of years at Green Bay. But Dick Bennett went in there, and there was Dick Lean coached after me until Bennett went in. It was a 3-year time there, and Dick went in and had some very good teams, and then it became it wasn't a question anymore. We were there, and we were the third Division I team in the state, and that's just the way it was because we had kind of carved out our niche, and it's done great now. Todd Kowalczyk is doing a good job there, and they're in the Horizon League, which is really a very good mid-major team. I mean, you go watch those games; they got very good players in that league, and they're big and they got quickness, and it's hard to win. And it's hard to win. It's a very good league.
Tell us about the circumstances that brought you to Long Beach.
Well, I went to Las Vegas, University of Las Vegas, for a year and was assistant with Jerry Tarkanian, and the Long Beach job came up, and I applied to it and I got hired there. So I was in Long Beach for 1 year, and then they made a coaching change. So I didn't really have much of a chance in Long Beach, but then I went to Qatar. I went overseas for 2 years and coached in the Middle East, and very interesting 2 years. They living in that culture and traveling. We went to a lot of countries in the Middle East, and also we went to Yugoslavia when it was still behind the Iron Curtain, and Egypt and Morocco and the Philippines, and we'd go and train and we'd play games, and so we did that for 2 years. So it was just one thing it did, it kind of put a different perspective on winning, being in that culture where you see people that really have nothing, and they got 50 guys playing basketball and one ball. In these Arab countries, they got 50 balls and they got one guy shooting. It's not just winning and losing when you're over there. It's surviving. It's having food and having a place with a roof on so your children don't get rained on. So it was very interesting in a lot of aspects.
Certainly, Coach Tarkanian has built some great programs also. I'm sure you learned a lot about basketball from him. What was that experience like working with him?
That was very interesting. And we're still friends. We still talk, and he had really had a strong program. We were very good when that year I was with him. And it's amazing. How many people come around. We won the first 24 games, and the people from all over the country were coming in there and wanted to interview Tarkanian, and boy, they did a lot of hatches jobs on him. They'd come in and want to talk about this real nice stuff, and then they'd go home and write articles about how his kids don't go to class, or just negative articles. But he's a trooper. He coaches with we always said he was like a World War II pilot. He put on his cloth helmet with the goggles and just kind of did it by feel and by instinct. And he's one of the best coaches probably ever, and he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, the National Hall of Fame. At one time, he had the best winning record of anybody in the history of the game. And if he hadn't gone back to Fresno, he still would. But he went back to Fresno State for a few years, and but he had about an 83% winning percentage. But he lost enough games at Fresno, even though he always had winning records. But he lost enough games that he's not the leading percentage winner anymore. But he was a terrific coach, and he's a very, very interested, very smart guy.
Coach, what about the move that you made to go back to the Division III level and coach for a number of years at St. Olaf? What was that experience like?
Well, when I got back from Qatar, I just read something in the paper that they had an opening. I was actually I was in California, and I knew St. Olaf. My wife Ruth went to St. Olaf when she was a freshman, and I'd go up there and see her. I was finishing up at Eau Claire, so I was familiar with the campus and the school, and so I made a phone call, and they showed some interest, and I went back to interview, and I wasn't sure, coming back from being overseas for 2 years, I wasn't sure how long I was going to stay there or anything, but St. Olaf is just a wonderful school. It's like an Ivy League school in the Midwest. It's just a great academic school, and they're interested in their athletics, and I loved it there. And it's kind of just pure coaching. It isn't. They don't fill the gym every night, but the players are really. They play hard and they want to learn, and you go coach. You're not worried. You don't have beat writers. There's nobody hounding you, and it was just a great way to end my career. I was there 7 years, and I decided that I was going to retire, and I was going to give it up and see if I could learn to golf a little better.
Do you still follow or keep interest in the game today, the game of basketball?
Sure. I go to games. I went to more games last year than I have for a long time, because my neighbor had a friend who was a big booster at Texas, and he got 2 of his tickets that are right at mid-court, about 10 rows off the court. So he wanted somebody to go in with him, so I went to most of their home games. So I also was in the Wisconsin. Ruth and I went into the Wisconsin game. Bo Ryan got us some tickets, and we sat there by his bench, and they won that game on that last second shot. It was just a heck of a game. And we saw Kansas play at Texas, and saw Bobby Knight's second to the last game. So it was much more. In-person watching. I always watch on TV. I got a satellite dish. I watch a lot of basketball on television.
Former Marshfield Tiger sports standout and one-time UW Green Bay and Long Beach State men's basketball coach Dave Buss, elected to the Marshfield Tiger Athletic Hall of Fame in 2008. This is Gene DeLisio for WDLB and WOSQ Sports.